Hey there, MAE 1010. I've had a couple of students over kind of a long period of time ask that I spend a little bit of time making short videos about specific things, including how to use Excel a little bit better. And so for an example, to do that, I chose to go back to our software and engineering lecture and go through one of the problems that we reviewed in class. And so we'll use that as the example about how to use Excel. And this is not meant to be an end-all training in Excel and cover every topic that you'd ever want to know in Excel. And just so you know, there are a lot more things that you can do in Excel than what I will be showing you today. So this is just a basic review for that homework assignment. And maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the ways that you can import things into Word. All right, so the problem statement there again was comparing a standard car with a booster kit car to see which one accelerated to 100 miles an hour faster. And so we have this table here that shows this performance spreadsheet for a modified car. And so they actually took data points along the way, and those data points are reflected here. So 3 seconds in, the car was going 46.5 miles per hour. At 4 seconds in, it was going 58.2 miles per hour, and so forth. And then the car manufacturer says that an unmodified car has this characteristic curve. So we'll talk a little bit about how to enter this as an equation into Microsoft Word, because some of your homework assignments require that sort of understanding. So let's start with a blank Excel spreadsheet. So how are we going to solve this? Well, we are going to take those data that were given in the table, and we're going to compare them to the theoretical car. So let's go back to our Word document here and copy this table. Control C is what I'm pressing. For copy, you can also right click on it and do a copy, which is right here. And then you go to the Excel file and Control V, or you can right click and do a paste. And so there's a few different ways that you can paste. This paste special will allow you to paste different types of information in. And so if you have tabulated data that is not separated, you might be able to say, every time there's a comma, move it to the next cell over. So there's a lot of different things you can do for that paste special. So for now, let's just make these a little bit bigger. So I'm going to highlight both cells, kind of make them a little bit larger like that. And you can see that it already kind of separated these two, whereas in the Word document, it was, it looks like maybe they were the same cell. And so you might have to do a little bit of formatting for things like that. A few different ways you can go about that is you can Control A, which is select all, Control C, which is copy. And then you could go into this cell and do Control V, which is paste. And so now it's all in that same cell, and you could do the same thing over here. Select the cell, Control A, Control C, and then go into this cell, Control V, hit spacebar. Now we can get rid of that top row. And I would recommend almost always to copy and paste and then go back and delete, because sometimes when you have equations, those equations might be linked to other cells when you're cutting and pasting versus copying and pasting, and those cut and paste equations may not work out right, and sometimes the formatting may not work out right. So I'm just going to format this just a little bit. I'm going to say wrap the cell text so it looks like that a little bit better. Maybe I'll center it, and then maybe what I'll do is make these a little bit smaller. So that looks pretty decent. I'm going to center these seconds here, and you notice that we lost some data here. So if I hit this button here, it will add some zeros to that, and same thing here. I can make it all uniform and have these first or second decimal point value in there. So it's just a little bit of formatting for those two. If we're happy with that, we can probably move on. And back to our original problem, what do we want to do? Well, we want to figure out which vehicle is faster than the other one at to get to 100 miles per hour. And so the unmodified vehicle has a characteristic curve like this. So like we did in class, we're going to go ahead and put that equation in here. So I'm going to change this from car speed to modified car speed just by clicking on the cell and entering that in. So I like everything else in that. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that over here. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. You notice that I just double clicked and it will go to the widest that is in that column. So if I go in here to unmodified car, now we can use that equation. So anytime you're going to enter an equation, you can put the equal sign in there. And if we go back to our equation, that is, I'm going to just put it side by side here. So we can look at both of them at the same time. So that equation is 136.5 times, and so for times I hit Shift 8 to get that little asterisk in there, and I'm going to multiply that, and I'm going to put it in parentheses just like you see in the equation there. 1 minus E, and in Excel E is EXP, so that's the same as E. So now I'm saying the exponent here is, and I opened up a parenthesis there to say everything inside these parentheses is what I'm raising E to the power of. So I put negative 0.158 times the variable T, which is time. And so the time that we have here is these seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that in. So now I should be able to close out those parentheses. And so you can see it changes these colors for parentheses here. So red matches with red and black matches with black. So now I know that those parentheses are closed out. So I've got that in there now, and I notice that I've got 0, which makes sense because we have time at 0. So really we shouldn't have any acceleration or speed at that particular instant in time. Now, if I drag this down, there's 2 ways of doing it. I can drag it by the corner there. Actually, there's 3 ways. I can Control C and Control V and Control V and Control V. And every time I paste it, it's going to paste that same equation in there. But you notice if I click up here, it highlights the cell that it's referencing, and that cell moves down every time I paste it. And so each time you can see now it's at A4. And so that pasting helps me take it down. Another way you can do this is you can double click when it's there. Let me get rid of these 3. Double click there and it will go down until the last cell next to it is down there. All right, so now making this a little bit bigger so our tools are more visible, we can change the number of decimal points and we can center it by pushing those, and then we can highlight this because I want these cells to look the same as these. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this Format Painter, and now they look the exact same. So just an example here, let's say we put an equation there and it had all those digits like we had before, and I do that Format Painter. What do you think is going to happen? Now they look the same. So that's just a really fast way of saying, I want these cells to look like those, and you can do that. And there's a couple of different options you can run here. If you hover over it, it will give you those different options. So you can select it, you can hold it down, and you can double click on it. And then you can do that to many cells at the same time instead of just one cell at a time or one selection at a time. All right, so now we have this equation that seems to be working properly. And just by picking this out, it's kind of hard to tell which one gets there faster. I mean, you could probably say somewhere in here is going to be about 100 miles an hour. And so, yes, it's clear that the modified car makes it to 100 miles an hour faster. But if you want more data or a different look at the data, then we'll use a scatter plot. And there's a lot of different ways that you can go about this. You can highlight the data that you want first and then put it in, and it will kind of guess as to what you want on the plot. And so we'll look at that. I'll Control Z, which is undo. So I'm going to highlight all this, and I'm going to go to Insert, Scatter Plot. So it guessed what I wanted, and that's pretty darn close to what I want. The one thing that I pointed out in class is that one of these is an equation. And so it's smooth, and it maybe doesn't represent exact reality at every point, but it's close enough that it represents what's happening with the car. And so one of those has that equation in there, whereas the other one are discrete points. And so they're measured points. And so we want to distinguish the difference between those two. So this is, again, a formatting thing. You can just click on the line that you want to change. And there's a lot of things that you can do with that one line. You can add a trend line, you can do error bars, you can do data labels. And so all these things are ways to help you see what's going on in the plot. And so you can also click on that and right click, and you can say, I want to change the series chart, or I want to format the data series, which is what I want to do. You can see this slide slides over on the side, and there's a lot of different options you can do. So you can make the line a different color, solid, gradient. You can make it markers on there. You can change the color or size of the marker, how big they are. There's a lot of different things you can change on that. So what we're going to do here is go back to the line and say, I don't want a solid line. I want a dashed line. So I'm going to select the dashed line, and that helps the reader understand that that dashed line represents discrete data points. And there's a few other things you could probably do to help them understand that. Like if you put data labels on there, then it's clear that at that point at 5 seconds, the car was going 78.6 miles per hour. Other things that are pretty typical to do is maybe you get rid of some grid lines if those grid lines don't mean much to you, or if they're maybe misleading or clutter up the data that you want to prepare or you want to convey to somebody else. Chart title. So you can go down here to chart title, and you can change where it goes on the chart. And then you can just double click on that, and you can change the name of it. You can also change your legend here. There's a few different options that are just automatic. You can change the location of the legend, and then there's more options. And more options, you notice that there's a lot more stuff that you can do over here. You can also just drag it to where you want it to be if you want it to be in a specific location. So let's say I would rather, sometimes it's a little tricky to select the right part to make it look the way you want, but say you wanted to kind of maximize what you're looking at, you can do it that way. You can also click on these axes. And again, every time you click on something, you might notice that the options over here for the format data series changes each time. So if I click here, maybe I want to show different tick marks on here, or maybe I want to change how things are being displayed. So axis options. So maybe the maximum, I want to accentuate something that's happening between 0 and 60 miles an hour rather than the 120. So I can change that range, and same thing on that this axis here. There's really nothing going on if we're looking at 0 to 60. And so we can change this to cut that off to 5 seconds. So really we just care about what's happening between 0 to 60 miles an hour or 0 to 5 seconds. So you can see, you can zoom in on what is most valuable to whatever story you're trying to tell in your paper that you're discussing. So now once you've analyzed the information, there's a few different ways to display it. So you can Control C, and I'm going to go back to my Word document. I'm going to say, I want to display this table in here. Let's just go down to the solve area. And there's a few different ways that you can paste this. You can hit Control V for paste, and that will actually make it so this is modifiable. And so it thinks that it's part of Excel. So it can do calculations, you can change things, or you can just paste it in as an image if you don't want somebody to change it or if you need some formatting done. So if you notice that, I'll Control Z. I can Control V for paste, or I can right click, and the paste options all show up here. So you can see link and use destination styles. You can keep source formatting. There's just a lot of different ways that you can paste this in here. All right, so going back to our data table, maybe same thing for this plot. You want to paste that in there. So going back to our sheet, let's say we want to paste it below here. We can Control V, which is just paste, and you can see it looks the exact same. And I can probably even make some modifications to some of these. Look at that, it looks just like it did in Excel. So let's go back up to 9.0 seconds. And let's change this back to, I think it was at 120 miles per hour. And so now going back to that, I can close that, and look, it just automatically updated. Sometimes you run into some issues with formatting because the size that you're pasting it in here might be a little bit different. So you can see we lost a little bit of information there. So that's why sometimes you're going to want to paste these tables in as an image and right click on that to do it. It's still on my clipboard. I can paste it in as a picture. So you can see it looks just like it did in Excel before we did that pasting. So hopefully that helps a little bit with some of the basics of Excel. There's a lot of different things you can do in Excel, but the basic idea or concept of using these cells to do your calculations is very helpful when you're dealing with a lot of different variables. And the one thing that you'll want to be careful of is always write out on a piece of paper what your units are, and make sure that what you're calculating in each individual cell is properly accounts for the unit conversions as you're going from units to units. That, I would say, is by far the number one mistake that students make when they're using Excel to do their calculations, is an error in their units. So write down the units on a piece of paper, make sure they all cancel, and then maybe run one or two on your calculator and make sure that those units are what you actually want in your final outcome. One other quick thing that I think is very helpful that I'm just going to show you is this conditional formatting option. You go up here, and there's a lot of different ways you can conditionally format, but this is a super simple one to just hurry and click on something, and it helps trends stand out without actually making a plot. So you can see these trends look like they are pretty similar. And so it might be hard for you to see the difference when you get up to that 100 miles an hour, but it does help you notice trends as they are displayed in this form. There's a lot of different ways. You can say every time a word is in a cell, it will highlight that cell in a specific way. There's just a lot of good ways of highlighting information using this conditional formatting. So I would suggest spending some time getting familiar with that. Last thing that I will say here is if you are putting in equations and you don't know exactly what equation you want to put in, you can hit this FX button and it will step you through. So there's a whole bunch here, or you can start typing a brief description, average, and it will pull up some different options down below that include average. And so if you say, all right, I want this to average if this criteria occurs, you can double click on it and it will help you step through what you want to take an average of. So then it sees that the criteria is if, and it has a little description here. Range is the range of cells. The criteria are going to be fines and average for the cells specified by a given condition or criteria. So you can say if this is greater than something 2, then it's true. And then the average range is another option. So you can just step through this and it will show you the formula result and if that formula is working properly. So that right there is a very handy tool. And if you already have an equation and you're trying to figure out what's going on with it, you can click on that and it will help you understand what's going on within that equation. All right, hopefully that's a short enough video. Probably seemed, it seemed to me like it ended up being a little bit longer than I originally anticipated, but hopefully that will help you with some Excel challenges for this intro class. All right, take care.